Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another live stream podcast from the Arcadia High School Creative Musical Arts and Sciences program. My name is Richard Maxwell. How's it going? This is our second podcast since we brought them back 2 weeks ago, I guess. We stopped for about a year with everything else going on. We still do weekly shows. In fact, we will have a weekly live stream this Friday, also at 2:45. ArcadiaCMAS.com and on YouTube. Hopefully you can join us. I'm here with several folks. I'm gonna unmute everybody as we go. There's Minx. Hi, Minx. How are ya?
Yeah.
And then Ari's over here.
Hello there.
We have a fun moving camera. We'll see how long this lasts. This is
hey
Chantel, how you doing?
I'm doing okay.
You doing okay? And then Mallory is over here.
Maxwell's like
How are you?
cat with the laser
Doing
pointing.
good.
I know. I'm like, this is way too much fun.
This
is-
it even
this
has
is-
a red circle on
This
it.
is really probably not the best idea for me to be running this. But I'm only running it this first time, and we'll see what happens after that. Okay, so,
All right, it's your turn next.
Oh no.
yeah, actually it might be. Okay,
Probably.
so I thought what we would do is we would start with this concept of censorship and kind of figure out first what it is. We're only going about 30 minutes, and I know a couple of you got to kind of head out for some other obligations, but I did want to at least see if we could cover two things. One is, what is censorship and what is it not? Because I think sometimes people think it's just banning stuff, and it's not really what it is. At least I don't think that. I'm curious what you guys think. And then the other part of it is, if we have time, I'd like to see, are there circumstances where censorship, by the definition we give it, is maybe not a bad thing? And is the problem with the label? I can think of a couple of examples. I'm not positive of this. I'm just, again, trying to figure out maybe what the possibilities are, if that makes sense. So,
Looking directly at Kids Bob.
okay. So why don't we? So does anybody want to like? I'm gonna take these headphones
Kids
off.
Bob.
Does anybody have like a start? Like what? Why don't we start there? Like, what is censorship to you guys? What does that mean in the context of being teenagers in 2022? What is censorship?
When I hear, oh wait, you can go.
Oh yeah. No, you
Minx, you go.
mentioned. Well, you first mentioned, of course, like censorship words, which I think is mostly what comes to mind first of all. But then you could think of things, like I said, not being funny, but there is things like Kids Bop too, where it censors songs or kind of rewrites it as a whole to make it more suitable for a different audience.
Yeah. Okay. So is that second thing really censorship? Like,
I would
where's
say
the
it is.
where's the line?
Censorship
Hold on a
is
minute.
just
Hold on.
like-
Let me
okay.
get my camera there. There we go. Ari, sorry.
Censorship is just like systematically removing specific stuff because you want it to come out a different way than it actually is, I'd say.
Can you give me an example
Like
of that?
censoring in politics, for example. People or governments will censor stuff because they want their people to believe a certain thing.
Okay.
So they're trying to achieve a specific purpose from that.
Okay.
And with like Kids Bop, they're censoring the words because they want it to be better for a different audience.
Okay.
That's also a different kind of censorship when you think about it.
So that
because-
censoring versus censorship.
Yeah, censoring versus censorship.
Yeah, when I hear like censoring or like censorship,
Mhm.
I think like people on Twitter just like being angry about not being able to say certain
This
things.
person said
Not
the
good.
F
Okay.
word.
Or, like,
Okay.
yeah,
Not a good idea to think about them.
yeah.
So
Twitter.
so
This
that
is being
does
brought up again.
that does bring up this idea of what constitutes like editing,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
what's censorship, and is there a point where you might say, like, I can, like, as a parent, back in my day. No, but as a parent, I can tell you that there are things that and you all know my son Gray, he's a student here, but there were things when Gray was like 3 or 4 years old. I'm like, I don't know if that's such a good idea at 3 or 4 years old, as much as we all know. I'm not exactly. Mr. Maxwell's not big on lots and lots of rules, but there
You
were
just
some things I'm
reminded
like, I don't know, if only because, as word as he's developed, as anybody's developing. So as a parent, you have one thing, but then at the same time, as he's gotten older, the very same things that I wasn't, that I would say no, now I actually want him to see. Like it's not a one size fits all, which is why on one hand Grayson could have been like, you're censoring what I can watch on YouTube, and I guess he's right.
My mom did that. For
I
a
mean,
while.
but
But-
there's like
Eventually,
I mean, one day he's gonna like go out and find it on his own. So I mean, like everything's censored until it's not. Like over time, some things just don't get censored anymore. Like in the early like 1950s, lots of like ads and stuff were being censored for being too like inappropriate for like the news.
Okay.
But nowadays like we like promote these kind of things. So I think it's all about like overall time.
Okay, so is that so are we so that's maybe one thing already that we maybe know, which is that apparently I think, are we agreeing that censorship on some level is a product of circumstance?
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think, okay, there's censorship of parents who are like this is what you can and can't listen to, and there's censorship of like radio or like kids stuff, kids shows themselves.
Okay.
But you've actually reminded me. I don't know if any of you guys saw the drama a while back when like Cardi B was recording a video and her little daughter came in and she instantly like stopped all the music. People were so upset because they were like, "Why would you let our kids listen to that, and not let your kid?"
That's a very interesting. Wow, I did not know about that.
But
Okay.
then
Well, it's the
again,
parents' choice to do
Yeah,
that.
it-
That's
exactly.
You have to be a good parent to like know the
The-
boundaries you're setting for your kid.
Yeah, the internet is like just huge. You can't control what your child's watching all the time. And if you do, it's like it's a lot to work with. I
Okay.
mean, yeah, they're gonna kind of discover things on their own. I mean, like you can censor it for as long as you can, but like eventually they're gonna find out about it.
Okay.
Usually by the internet. And like as
Okay.
much as I have like thoughts on Cardi B, like it's not her fault that children are listening to her music. Her demographic isn't children, obviously.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure she labels her music as explicit too. So again, it's the parents' fault if they let
Okay.
their kid
So
watch it.
okay. So it's the 1980s.
Oh boy, I don't like
Oh,
that.
no.
I'm a child of the 80s. Leave me alone.
Well, stop that.
See, I got another back in my day moment. No, but there is this thing that comes out called the PMRC, the Parents Music Resource Center. And if you've never heard of it, it's actually a pretty fascinating moment in arts and in music and in all these different things that are happening at the time. There are some songs by Prince that are, let's say, questionable lyric content is involved. We're not going to quote them on this podcast.
Right.
Or any, no one's covering this set of songs in
everybody
one of our
off
live
stream.
shows. But there's this whole big thing, and ultimately Congress gets involved. And it's actually a Democratic senator's wife who kind of starts the ball rolling with it. And the idea is to figure out if there should be some kind of not restriction in terms of you're not allowed to release the music, but in terms of should there be some kind of warning label, kind of like like on cigarettes, kind of literally, like
Yeah.
this could be harmful and this has content or whatever, da 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 da. And a lot of different critics, a lot of different people say a lot of different things. We've got a comment here from a fellow student who's not here but has something, so we will get to that in a moment. Andrew Charlton is watching, which is cool. We talked about you earlier in your pedal board in the podcast. We need to do that again, Andrew, but separate conversation. Anyway, one of the things that came out of it was a lot of the artists, Frank Zappa in particular, of all people, who wound up aligning. It was very odd. They figured Zappa would be kind of crazy. They figured Dee Snider would be from the heavy metal band Twisted Sister. Zappa showed up in a suit. Snyder showed up in a ripped T-shirt and jeans. And the third person that talked to the committee was John Denver. And everybody assumed it's John Denver and it's the wholesome kind of vibe that he always gave off.
I have no
And
idea.
everybody just assumed that John Denver
don't
is
know
going to be on the side
Taking
of,
home
yes, we
materials.
need these blah, 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 blah. And he literally in front of the committee goes, this might be the most, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said this might be one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
And the artist basically said this: if you don't want your kids to listen to it, turn it off.
Yeah.
Yes.
That works in the 80s. That works when I'm your age.
But not now.
That does. And okay, so why doesn't it work now? You're
It's-
right. It doesn't work in 2022.
It's just access to the internet. We all have access everywhere.
You have access to everything.
But also something that I've noticed if you use like Spotify or anything, specifically they'll label songs explicit
Right.
so that you can have moments like that where parents
Yes.
can run accounts and stuff like that.
Well, which is
Makes it
good.
a little easier, but it's not gonna.
It
But
does.
if they
The
have
interest.
their own device, it's like, I guess they could try to monitor stuff, but
They
friends
they
can like show them stuff on
Mhm.
their phones, and
Right.
it's like there's no like actual way to completely censor stuff
So
for children.
it gets confusing fast. And
Yeah.
then what constitutes, frankly, like when a Spotify or a platform says this is explicit, and then you go to Apple and the same exact song is marked different. Like how do you
Yeah.
And I would like to think that for somebody like me, frankly, for somebody like you guys, you're aware of a lot more. I'm not saying that as like a humble brag. You are aware of a lot more being in this program. You look at music. I just can tell in our conversations, even just from August when I first started working with all of you. You think about all this stuff in a very different way than most teenagers. I'm proud of that. But it almost makes you guys, like by the time you guys are all seniors, it will almost make the conversations not irrelevant, but you're already off the mark from the standard teenager's viewpoint. So I'm not really sure. Andrew has an interesting thought here. He says, censorship could also be a producer or a record label that could cut things that the artist wants
I was
because
thinking
they
that.
don't like it.
That'd
was
be
thinking
creative
that.
censorship, I think.
That would be
Like censorship of the arts, then, because it's not necessarily like censoring of who gets to see it. It's just
why would a
making
label
sure
do
it
that?
doesn't
you think?
happen.
What would be the motivating factor for a label? Because
Usually-
I mean, the
Goes
the
against
public's
that.
response
Yeah.
is to like, I mean, one of the producer's main goals is to make sure that the audience responds well to the music. So usually when they cut something out or add something in, it's for the audience.
Which makes
Well-
it what kind of decision? I'm not being difficult here. I'm just trying to like walk your
Executive.
logic through. Why would they care? You're not wrong.
It's
For
gonna
more
be
money.
for-
Money.
Money.
yeah, or it could also. Couldn't it also come down to like the artist's like reputation too?
Which is also about
a
the
money thing, yeah.
because
Yeah.
But
they need the artist to be a good figure
Right.
or something.
So prior to Me Too, which we should have a podcast about that too, actually. Well, all kinds of. We could probably do this daily, almost, let alone bi-weekly.
I'm ready.
Good. Prior to Me Too, there was this theory that basically said there is no such thing as bad publicity. Because any controversy generated public awareness, which generated interest, which invariably translated to either album sales, television viewers, movie ticket sales, whatever. Whatever. Go to the art museum and see the display. It literally book sales crossed every conceivable medium. I'm not so sure that's the case anymore.
No. Definitely not.
Which is, I would argue, probably a good thing. But
Yeah.
again, does that mean censorship has, like, I guess my question would be, does that mean censorship has changed, or does something else change?
Well,
Probably just like the overall like I don't know.
I don't know.
It's weird to say like generations as the generations.
Yeah,
have
like
gone
it's.
by.
I think censorship has like stayed the same, but it's kind of like the public's like viewpoint on what we think is acceptable nowadays is more how we've like kind of evolved into what should be censored and what shouldn't. Because I mean like what I was saying, like back then people's minds were like not like necessarily smaller, but like they thought more things were like considered like wrong. I
Right.
completely agree with that. And I like have talks about that with my aunt and uncle all the time. Like some things that are like not acceptable today, they're going to be acceptable in the future. Like having your kid have like a septum piercing or something. Most parents are like, no.
Right.
But like our generation realizes, or like I think most of our generation realizes that like it's not something that harms you. So it's like, why take it away?
That's an interesting word to use. Harm. So in all seriousness, like you'd like to think.
But it can.
In what way? Other than like infections, if you don't get it done properly.
Well, I'm not talking about the piercing.
Oh.
I'm
That's
just
fair.
talking in general.
Zeroing
Like-
in on a very specific
Yeah.
art form right now. No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, as long as it doesn't harm you.
Well, here's the thing with like censorship music and stuff like that. If you don't censor some things, there could be absolutely a harm to like mental health of people, probably.
Right.
Okay.
Because there are certain songs that talk about very serious topics that
But does
Okay.
Does
I
that
believe there
require
should be-
censorship, or does that require like a rating system?
Yeah, like a warning.
Well,
I don't think you should hold that off from everyone because
Okay.
a few people.
well yeah,
might be
no, I'm not
affected by
saying
it.
you do, but
So
if
is
we're
that
gonna-
censorship then?
it's the type of censorship, could it not be?
Partially, I guess. I'm trying to think.
No, well, and
trying to think.
this is exactly the problem. It's where's the line, and is it like a sliding scale almost, like depending on the circumstance? There were all these famous cases. You don't hear about them as much anymore. I think because everybody likes to go and sue each other for like copyright infringement now more than anything
Oh
else.
yeah, so many of
But
those
there were
recently.
all these metal artists that got involved in. Mr. Peralta is one of our colleagues here at Arcadia. He just walked in, and actually we have an open mic. Do you want to join us on our discussion for censorship? We're only going about another 5-10 minutes, but you're welcome to, as long as everything you say is G-rated. So that'll be. I
Yeah, I was
know.
about to say.
I'm literally censoring you on a discussion about censorship, and you can't talk about me. I know. He has no.
Nor
motivation
students.
now.
Can't
Actually,
talk bad.
but we should
What's
hear
the
real
point?
quick. Check this out. I just want to say, let's all say hi to Mr. Peralta. There he is. Mr. Peralta actually runs our sister program, Film and TV, and is a wonderful supporter of what we do. And we're working on rebuilding our partnerships coming out of COVID with his program and stuff. So actually, I hope it's cool. I think I may have bullied you into being part of the conversation, sir. But
Well,
I'm glad you're here.
You better.
if this is a podcast, or I don't know what's going on here. Hi, people. I just showed up at random.
That's
I
okay.
came up
It
here
is
to
a
vent,
podcast.
but
I think it's
that's
a
fine.
video podcast. But anyway,
either way.
So we're talking about censorship, but we were talking about different types of censorship. So here's something that's interesting. Myself in trouble, but I do think, as a cause, balance kind of thing. Mr. Peralta, real quick, if I can take advantage of your expertise. I mean, we see this in movies.
Oh yeah, of course.
Probably even more than we see it in music because you have the visual element. I mean, with music videos, that became part of it
Yeah.
too. But
So I'm going to take it in a different direction when you talk about censorship in film. Censorship in film is actually censorship for money. Let's look at the MPAA. I'm actually staunchly against the MPAA. Yes, parents should know what is in a film.
real quick, the MPAA is...
Motion Picture Association of America.
There we go. Sorry.
They-
They establish ratings, G, PG,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
all that other stuff.
So MPAA, Motion Picture Association of America, establishes ratings: G, PG, PG-13, R, A, or X. All these ratings, but all these ratings are simply a way to say, hey, this is going to make money or not. Let's go with South Park. Yes, South Park is raunchy. South Park is quote unquote an adult show. When South Park the movie was being made, it was being made independently, had no major studio. But because of this and the MPAA liking to take money from big studios, they took money from them, or from the studios, but then they couldn't take any from South Park. They didn't have money to give. So it was rated X. Why? Because of all the jokes in it. It wasn't until the movie was bought by Paramount, a big name studio, that it was allowed to be rated R. Why? Money. So censorship in film is actually tied directly to monetary value of the film. Our movies make less money. Why? Parents see that, but movies will pay for that.
Well, so it's interesting, and your predecessor, Eric Luce, is a good friend of mine, and he and I have talked about the fact that like the ideal movie rating is PG-13. It gives them lots of flexibility for content, but does not eliminate the core disposable income market of people your age. I mean, and I think you're right. There is a money issue. We actually were talking about that in the music industry in the context of a producer
Yeah.
or a record label
Yeah.
cuts or makes changes. Okay, so we're gonna kind of wrap this up here in a minute. What I'm curious about though is, in context, as I'm gonna ask this question of all four of you.
Okay.
It's gonna come out a little bit different for Mr. Peralta because he is of a different age bracket, if you will. Although in my perspective, you're all just children.
Wow.
I'm like 100 years older. Don't look at me like that. I'm like literally 100 years older than you. I'm like 150 years older than all of them. No, here's my question.
He's just a vampire.
Pretty much. No,
Slaves
it's
apparently.
very difficult in the mornings when I'm biking and the sun comes up. I have to pedal really fast to get out of the sun. What? Screw. Anyway, okay. Well, here's my last question for you, and we are going to continue these discussions. And I think we go on break next week, but I think we've got some interest in continuing these. We've got a different group of people this time, and we'll keep doing these.
Except
I think
for
every
me.
week.
Here.
Here's my question to you in all seriousness. Do you perceive yourselves? Do you think that as you get older and you hit different, let's say, key moments of your life, whatever you think those are going to be, every 5 years, 10 years, whatever, everybody's got a different path. But just in general, do you think it's likely, A, that your sense of censorship, your definition of when to use it, do you think it will change? And if so, do you suspect you will become more likely to be more willing to say, I don't know about that thing, or more likely to say, you know what? Choose your own adventure here, folks. Like where do you fall in terms of like how important do you think censoring things will be at different stages of your life going forward? I know for myself, I mean, I if this will help so you guys can kind of get your thoughts together, my definition and sense of when censorship is appropriate has radically changed in the last 14 years, literally with the birth of my own sons.
Yeah.
Because prior to that, my view was kind of like the Zappa view, which was if you don't like it, turn it off.
Yeah.
I still fundamentally believe that, and I think that's because I would like to consider myself on a very on the best of days, I like to consider myself some kind of artist. And I think most artists would say, if you don't like what I'm creating,
You know how to listen.
then don't watch it, don't listen to it, don't look at it, and that's don't read whatever. That's reasonable.
Yeah.
But as a parent, I started to look at it differently. But like I said, for me, everything that I told the boys no, and even now there are some things in the back of my mind. I've got like this weird timetable of like, okay, when he's this age, no, but when he's that age, not only is it a yes, but you probably should see this. Things like I'm thinking like in a movie, like Schindler's List is a great example. I do not want my 5-year-old sons when they were 5. We're not watching Schindler's List.
Well, yeah, it's also about like the logical side.
But
of
we're
it.
watching
like,
Schindler's List pretty soon with Gray, who's 14 now, and
Yeah.
it's gonna be very
I've
upsetting.
never
But he
heard of
needs
that.
to know about the history of his family.
But when
and
you're
everything
5,
else
you
that went
can't
with that.
cope with those feelings the same way you can when you're 14.
Okay.
It's like
So that's my point.
Yeah.
It's changing. It's evolving. My sense of all of that, and I'm old, and you would think by now I'd have it figured out. I don't.
No.
I
I
like
don't think anyone will.
I absolutely think that I will think less censorship, or not less, either the same amount or less.
Okay.
Okay.
In the future, because I don't know. I just feel like we're realizing more and more things are like.
That's true. Back to the music
Like,
world,
I don't
something
know.
that's kind of funny is the fact that, of all things, Kiss in the 70s was like the worst thing. Parents it was like the evil band of all evil bands. And now, like, grandparents bring their grandkids to Kiss concerts. It's like a parody of itself. So I think there's evidence to what you're talking about. What is considered horrible and awful at one point becomes different. The rating system that Mr. Peralta brought up is almost hysterically, comically funny because there's like, oh yeah, that was rated that in the 70s, but nowadays it would be rated something totally different because society changes.
yeah.
Let's go around the horn really quick here, and then we're gonna get out of here. But what do you think?
I don't know. I feel like in the future I'm gonna have more of a well, currently and a little bit in the future, it's kind of a what do you think is the mental maturity of a person? Because sometimes people do grow up like a little faster or stuff like that
That's
too.
fair. That's fair.
But I know that in the future, like if I was to be a parent, it would definitely be a different view because then you have to start thinking about, well, what's the age? What are we looking at here? Like, what would be okay?
So circumstantial.
Yeah,
That's
it's
fair.
definitely just
That's
gonna
fair.
change.
And maybe that's the golden solution to this is being aware that it isn't one size fits all.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, and I'm not about to tell anybody how to live their lives or anything else. I just,
Yeah.
as artists, with what we do in this program, this is an issue that we need to at least be aware of.
It's I think I'll always know what the censorship for myself is, not for other people.
And maybe that's the starting point. But someday, if you're a parent, which hopefully you will be, because I think that, you never know. I know right now you're not, and you shouldn't be worried about that. But I'm just saying, eventually, but that may change. I don't know, who knows? Riley says, just real quick before we get to Ari here, I think this generation of kids are extremely desensitized to visual issues, graphic videos online and such, but are also super intolerant of emotional, social issues like censorship of speech and music. That's an interesting dichotomy that the,
I don't need a crisis.
I think it's just based on like what forms of media became more popular. Like,
Okay.
I'm not gonna say video games are super violent because I don't think they like cause all that stuff, but the prevalence of video games definitely has made people see things differently.
So it's interesting too, because in the case of video games, there's almost two different issues. One is the violence, but one is also the other side of that is the realism of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because video games, there's always been a violent element to them, even at their inception. But the difference is they didn't have any, like, early on, there was no realistic element to it.
That's
in
what I
any
kind of like about
capacity.
video games.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair.
And like you get that part there.
That's fair.
You get
Chantel,
that-
what do you think? Well, we just
I
that's
kind
okay.
of feel like I just said it.
No, that's
but-
okay. You're good, Mr. Peralta. Or did you have? I'm sorry, Chantel. Did
No,
you
I don't
more?
have anything else.
Okay, that's okay. I didn't want to cut you off. You get the last word, sir.
So I get the last word, but
No
so-
pressure, but don't mess it up.
I mean, I'm not a
all
parent
on
yet, but
you.
I've been out of college now, going on.
You work with teenagers
I work
every
with
day, though.
teenagers. But yeah, true. They are my quote unquote kids. But even then, I am in the Frank Zappian sense of censorship as well. If you don't like it, don't watch it. But at the same time, we're going through another massive invasion in the world right now with Ukraine, and I've seen images from it that are hard to stomach of what the reality of war is like. I'm not going to censor that. Well, I showed at work though, probably not, because that is its own level of trauma in its own to have a discussion with, and I'm not prepared. I mean, it's not that I'm not prepared to handle those discussions. That's not my discussion to have with them quite yet. But at the same time, when it comes to music, censorship there, I think, happens because there are certain things that are society is more acceptable now, and they're less tolerant of it when people say them nowadays than they are in film. Film actually has been a lot more progressive. Studios are trying to do it, even though sometimes it feels performative. They're a lot more progressive. But certain industries or certain genres of the music are not quite there yet. I mean, you can listen to Jason Isbell and how he talks about country and his issues with country.
Yep.
I mean,
Brilliant artist, by the way. If you haven't checked out Jason Isbell's music, you definitely
Jason
should.
Isbell's great. It's censorship is a complicated issue in itself. Is that nothing should be censored, but the way you handle it personally is how it goes. So
Sure.
there's things I moderate myself. I don't cuss in class for the most part, but when I'm with friends, my mouth becomes like a sailor. But that's just because of where I'm at. It's not censorship; it's speech codes. But that's a whole other subject.
No,
for
but
a whole other time.
and the other part of it, and maybe this will be the week where we come back from fall break. Maybe the topic, cancel culture.
Ooh.
Because
That
all
would
of a
be a
sudden
good
now,
one. That would be a good one.
but do you see how it relates? Because suddenly, you have this issue of, okay, now are we censoring? I mean, there's a whole other, and it's complicated.
I feel like that was kind
I
of
hate
talked about in the last.
it was a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard. Anytime you get to a
Cancel
point,
culture is
It just
everywhere.
rabbit holes and.
yeah, it does. But it's also this idea of anything. We're talking about limiting art, and then and it comes down to fundamentally. We'd like to think that's inherently wrong, but sometimes I'm not. There are circumstances. I don't really want my kids, Gray and Tanner, to have Hitler's artwork. I don't.
You're not wrong on that. And if I may add a quick
But
point to that.
but I don't want them to not be aware of the fact that he saw himself as a painter at one point, because ignoring history is how history gets repeated.
I think that's a little bit different from cancel culture the way we have it now.
Well, yeah, but that's an extreme
Yeah.
thing, and talk about somebody that deserves to be canceled. I know, but you
Yeah.
get into
When we get into the murk of it, I mean, we can bring up filmmakers. James Gunn.
Sure.
There are still people who get mad at me for standing by this guy. I stand by James Gunn. Why? Because people have the capacity to change. I believe it's a fundamental lie when people say people cannot change. James Gunn in the beginning of his career was a shock artist. He was, if I had known him begin his career, I wouldn't have supported him.
Sure.
But knowing people have a capacity to change, where he was at then to where he is at now is miles different.
We
He
talked
did not
about
deserve
this.
to be canceled.
Well, one of the things, and I will end on this just because of the sake of time. But one of the things we talked about last time that we should probably talk about in more depth is this line where, yes, you absolutely should be allowed to evolve and you should be able to grow and mature and everything else. But there are certain things that do kind of fall into that category of not forgiving that. We're just not.
Oh, no, absolutely.
And I'm not saying I don't know. But it's an interesting point. In any case, I want to thank everybody for joining me today. Riley and Andrew online, and Minx here in the main room, and Ari and Chantel and Mr. Peralta, and also Mallory, who had to depart early. But I appreciate everybody being part of it. We are going to be back next week. We're on fall break. I would start looking for. I'm going to take the camera off of him. Next week we'll be on fall break, but we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Keep looking at arcadiacms.com for the most updated calendar. We'll see if we can start pushing out the topics soon. Thanks everybody for being a part of this. Friday live stream show, last one of the quarter. 2:45 p.m. should be a good one. If you've been paying attention in the background a little bit, we've got some new lighting toys that we're going to add to things, and we're going to see about maybe some new
How did we
camera
not
angles,
notice
and
that?
hopefully nobody got too nauseous with all the spinning frames going by with the single camera we use that moves fast. But it was
Everybody's
fun.
been thrown up.
Anyway, have a good afternoon, everybody, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye bye.